Welcome back to the Silent Plus podcast. My name is Josh Wofford, and to the right of me is
Josie Walt.
He's a pro now.
He's got it.
And to the left of me is
John Nicholson. I'm here.
The crew is here.
That's right.
This is why we pay Joe the big bucks to be an intern to do podcasts with us.
Right.
We just needed an extra voice on the podcast, so we brought Joe on board. So.
Sure.
Well, we are continuing our Minor Prophet series, and John, we were talking about before, like, this has just been fun.
It has been.
From y'all's Sunday school class to Sunday morning sermons.
And just side conversations that we're having with other
Right.
folks in the community or the church that as they're engaging with it. You know, it's really been good.
Yeah, so even though these are lesser known books, I think that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
I think people are discovering stuff for the very first time. Like I said, I think it was the last podcast, we really know John 3:16,
Right.
or at least know the words. I don't know if we've ever really plumbed the depths of it, right?
I don't know that you can. Right.
But there's probably a lot of verses in the Minor Prophets that people are reading either for the very first time or just recognizing for the very first time. And then some of it is probably, oh yeah, I have read that in my New Testament.
Right.
That's where that's from.
That's where that's from.
And so there's a lot of connections being made.
And one of the things that's happening for me, I don't know about you guys, I was talking with Roger the other day about this, that reading them intentionally and slowly like this, but reading them to go back to the Hebrew Bible, that they're one book, and to read them with that at least parked in the back of my mind, and to try to perceive what story is this telling, or what are the questions that are being asked throughout this. And it's really been fascinating to think through them and meditate on them as a whole, rather than little, like Obadiah, rather than a one chapter little shot across the bow. It's part of a bigger story here.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the much bigger story of the whole redemption arc that they're part of as well.
Yeah. Well, since you bring that up,
Yeah,
John,
yeah.
I've looked at why Obadiah is where Obadiah is.
Where is Obadiah?
Obadiah is after.
Where is it?
It's a really good question historically, but canonically, in our scriptures, it's between Amos and Jonah.
Right.
And so there's been a lot of discussion about why it's there. But you see at the very end of Amos, it says in this is Amos 9, verse 11, "In that day I will raise up the booth of David that has fallen, and repair its breaches, and raise up its ruins, and rebuild it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom, and all the nations who are called by my name, declares the Lord who does this." Mm-hmm. So we have Edom right here at the end of Amos. Mm-hmm. And so there is a theory that the Hebrew scholars who are putting together their Bible were collecting these scrolls of the prophets and decided that since Amos ends talking about Edom, let's dig into what it means that they may possess the remnant of Edom.
What a great observation.
Because that's what Obadiah is talking about.
Yeah.
Right there at the end of Obadiah, it's all about they will possess their possessions, right? And then it goes through the promised land, and then it adds Edom to that kingdom. So, and then also it comes before Jonah.
Right.
Okay, what's the connection there?
I don't know. Tell us, John.
Here's a theory. Again, we don't know for certain, but here's the theory. Obadiah, verse 1, the vision of Obadiah. "Thus says the Lord God concerning Edom, we have heard a report from the Lord, and a messenger has been sent among the nations." And whoever that messenger is doing what that messenger is supposed to do. Proclaim the message, rise up, let us rise against her for battle. And so this is all about a message being proclaimed to the nations about what Edom is about to incur. And then you turn the page literally, and Jonah receives the message to go to the nations, and he flees away. He disobeys. That's a theory.
Yeah, this goes right back to what I was talking about, that when you start reading these as a unit, that they have some association. They're not just little discrete messages that are out there and they've just been collected and, well, that's nice, little anthology, but there's something more going on.
Yeah.
There's a larger arc. There's a storyline, if you will, not in the traditional idea that we would think of when we pick up a book to read, but there's connectivity between these. There's a message that's being communicated through it. I think it's tremendous. It's fun ferreting out these kinds of things.
Oh yeah, yeah. And again, these are just all possibilities. We're not entirely.
But you
certain,
can see it. You can see.
Oh yeah, you can see the connections.
Yeah.
You know, you also think of the very last sentence of the book of Obadiah, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. I mean, what a beautiful thing that Jonah does go to Nineveh. He does preach, and that kingdom repents and turns to the Lord. And so there's also that possible connection there, showing that, you know, not just the kingdom, but any kingdom can be the Lord's.
That's amazing.
If they turn and repent.
Wow.
So Obadiah is short, but he packs a punch.
I hear you, man. I hear you, and I see that. Yeah, make your own short jokes. That's good. I was trying to avoid them, but
yeah. I got short guy syndrome. Whatever it is, I guess.
That's good.
You know,
maybe
can't leave Obadiah out.
There you go.
But
I will tell you, when we were first discussing the early draft selection for what sermons we were going to preach and that sort of thing, Obadiah was not high on my list. It was not one that I wanted to, and I noticed that Joe didn't pick it out of the first few that he wanted to preach either. So why preach Obadiah?
Well, if you want to know the truth, it's because nobody else could. Joe was.
You drew the short straw.
Joe, yeah. Joe was preaching the first few, and then you're gone this coming Sunday.
Right.
So you couldn't preach it, and so it just came to me. We actually called John David.
Yep.
Because John David really likes Obadiah. I remember for when I had him in Bible class at Marion Academy, that was just something he latched onto. I think he preached a sermon on Obadiah at Revive one time.
How about that?
And so,
all right, there's a callback podcast for the future. We'll
we'll call him back. We should have got him on here for this one, but anyway, so talked to him, and he was like, "Yeah, I would love to do that." And then he came back a couple days later. He's like, "Hey, I forgot I'm supposed to be at the beach that weekend." So he couldn't do it. So here I am.
Choosing the water before the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
You've been notified, John David.
So anyways, I did not choose to preach Obadiah. Obadiah chose me.
There you
go. Or the Lord chose me to preach Obadiah. And it has been fun studying for it.
I hear you.
What you got, Joe?
So when is Obadiah? When is he prophesying or, receiving this vision? Because Edom has a very long history with Israel. Because I don't know if you know this, but I've been trying to listen through the entire Bible, and I just got to Deuteronomy 2 today. So that means today I went over where in Numbers where Edom refuses to let the 12 tribes pass through their land.
Right. It's kind of part of the story, if I recall.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm just wondering because it sounds very similar. So I'm wondering what they're doing at this time.
Yeah.
And what they're waiting for, because it talks about them waiting to sack, the 12 tribes, to sack Judah or Israel, whichever one it was.
So
But you just stepped into a steaming pile of debate.
I figured I might, but I thought I'd ask.
What they're calling it now?
So, that's what I'm calling it now. So, cut to the chase, what I believe is that Obadiah is prophesying right after King Nebuchadnezzar's ransacking of Jerusalem.
Yeah. Okay.
And what Edom did was allow him passage, and then went in and looted Jerusalem after the fact, and just made a whole mess of it, right? So that's what I believe. That's kind of the prevailing theory. Mm-hmm. But there are numerous other theories. You go back and read through 1st, 2nd Samuel. Saul and David have a whole lot of run-ins with Edom. They become a vassal state. They rebel against Israel, or at that point Israel. And then, so some people think that that's a part of, or when Obadiah is prophesying during the reigns of Saul and David.
So what I'm hearing out of this little brief discussion of the history is there's a whole lot of backstory we better get hold of if we're going to have any chance of getting what Obadiah is trying to say.
Right, because Edom was not just some random country that came out of nowhere during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar.
No, it was family.
Yeah, it is absolutely family. And so if you're in Sunday school this coming Sunday, I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but the Sunday school that of the week that I preach Obadiah, we're going to look through some genealogies.
Nice.
Boy,
I don't want to miss that.
I'll go ahead and I love.
I thought I just got through those.
Yeah.
I just got to do it.
So genealogies are typically the free Bible reading day.
Yeah,
you
that's
just
exactly
kind of look
right.
at it. You're like, no,
Yep.
I'm not reading all
Done.
those names.
Check.
Yep, check that box. You particularly you got Genesis 10. Right before the tower, or I'm sorry, Genesis 10, the Table of the Nations. It's nothing but a chapter
of
that. Then you got the beginning of Numbers that you apparently just got through.
Oh, well, yeah.
And then you have the first 7 chapters of First Chronicles that is nothing but genealogy. And your first question is, well, why?
Yes.
Right? We have a whole lot of questions about theology and God and who He is and how He works in the world, and God spends a whole lot of airtime telling you where so-and-so came from. And you're like, God, if you're writing to us a book of all the answers to all of our questions, why in the world did you tell me who Methuselah's dad was? Because I do not care. Right? But when you're reading through it, and it's also a good question to ask when you come upon a genealogy is, where is it at in the story?
Yeah, that's good.
Because you could be reading, you're like, action. Oh yeah, that's happening. And then it pauses, and you get a whole list of names. You're like, why?
Yeah.
It seems to break up the action. It's like you're watching a really, really good movie, and then it pauses, and then it tells you, well, here's the backstory on this character. And you're like, I don't want to know the backstory on the character. I want to know what happens to him, right? And anyway, so particularly in Genesis, they're very, very important. And Esau, we meet Esau in Genesis.
Yes, we do.
Whose name is also Edom. It's kind of like Israel and Jacob. Same guy, 2 different names. Now, Esau's name is Edom because it sounds like the Hebrew word for red. And there's 2 different origins of that name in Scripture. One, he eats red lentil stew that he sells his birthright to Jacob for. And it says, and therefore he was named Edom. He was named Red because he sold his birthright for a pot of stew.
What a terrible way to get a nickname.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget the bread.
Every time he gets called that, he's reminded, that's why I sold my birthright.
Sold my birthright. And then also he was a very hairy man.
Right.
Even coming
and he
out
had
of the
red hair.
Even when he was born.
Yeah.
And so he was red. But then also, Edom as a country, the mountains that Edom was centered around, they were reddish
Red rock.
mountains.
Right.
So there's all this red associated with Edom and Esau himself. And so there's probably more that could be teased out with that, but we won't go there today. But so here's where it all begins, is back in the Garden of Eden.
So you're telling me, for me to understand Obadiah, I gotta hit the rewind button all the way to Genesis 1.
You got to. At least Genesis 3.
Okay, 3, yeah.
I mean, it was probably good to go to Genesis 1, but
Right.
in Genesis 3, after Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they hide from God. God finds them, and then the blaming begins. Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent, and then the curses go in reverse, with the serpent's curse coming first. And he says that I will put enmity between your seed, the seed of the serpent, and the seed of the woman. And he will crush your head, and you will bruise his heel. And so that seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, the enmity begins there.
Right.
And we see that teased out just in the very next story between Cain and Abel. And so you can follow Cain's genealogy after that and see that Cain is becoming the line of the serpent. He is of the seed of the serpent. Even though he was born of Eve,
Right.
he chooses evil because sin is crouching at his door.
And he does not master it.
And he does not master it. And anyway, so you can see that even from the line of promise, the seed of serpent can come. And so from Eve, you got Cain and Abel. Cain
I just heard
kills
Jesus saying to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan."
Yeah,
Anyway, go ahead.
right. And so you have from Adam and Eve, you have Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, but then Seth is born.
Yeah.
And then from Seth is born Enosh, and it says during that time the people began to call upon the name of the Lord. So you see, from the line of Seth will be the seed of the woman. All right, then you follow that on down to Noah. Noah has 3 sons: Japheth, Ham, and does anybody remember?
I'm supposed to, and I'm not going to pull it out of my head. Shem. Thank you.
But Ham is cursed, right? Ham uncovers the nakedness of his father, and he is cursed. From Ham, you get a guy called Nimrod.
Oh, lovely Nimrod. I remember him for some reason.
From Nimrod, he creates the kingdom of Babylon and the kingdom of Nineveh.
2 great, outstanding moral cities.
He fathers Egypt and Canaan. All right, so you see 2 of his sons are Egypt and Canaan, and then he goes on to found 2 cities called Babylon and Nineveh, 2 great enemies of the people of God. But from Shem comes Abraham. Right? So, again, from Noah, you have the line of the serpent, the seed of the serpent, and the seed of the woman. So, we're not going to talk about Ishmael and Isaac. I think that's pretty clear. But then, from Isaac, you have 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. And here's where it gets complicated. If that
As if it weren't complicated enough.
Isaac and Rebekah receive a prophecy before either of them are born.
Right.
That the older shall serve the younger.
Yep.
That is something they know before anyone's ever born.
Right.
They're born, Jacob is born holding on to Esau's heel, therefore he's called heel grabber. Yep. That's what Jacob means. And anyways, so from there, the first instance that they have the run in is Esau comes in. He's exhausted from working out in the fields. Jacob makes him sell, or doesn't make him, but says, "Hey, why don't you sell me your birthright?" And so he does for a pot of red lentil stew.
What's up, Red?
Yeah, so sells his birthright at that point. But then later on, when Isaac's going to bless Esau because he's about to die, he's about to pass down the inheritance, the birthright, the blessing to Esau, and then Rebekah finds out, and they figure out this way to trick Isaac, and we're not going to get into all that. But here's what I want to say about that. We often look at that and we're like, man, Rebekah and Jacob are a little
shifty,
sneaky.
Yeah.
Right? And it says that Isaac's favorite was Esau, but Jacob was the favorite of Rebekah.
Right.
I see Rebekah as holding on to the promise that was given to them at the beginning.
That the younger.
And Isaac is working out of the flesh like Abraham did whenever he went into Hagar and had Ishmael.
Man, you were sewing a whole lot of scriptural pieces together.
Right. But what comes from that is, as Ishmael was the seed of the serpent that came from Abraham, and Isaac was the one of the promise, the seed of the woman, so is Jacob the line of the promise, and Esau the seed of the serpent.
Wow. And
you see that bear out. You see in the genealogy of Esau. Okay, you move to the I think that's Genesis 35 or something like that.
Something like that.
It begins, and he married from the Canaanite women.
He did.
He married from Ham's line.
He did.
And then he also married a daughter of Ishmael. So you see how even in the genealogies, Moses is writing, and God's showing us how these people are going to align themselves. Are they going to curse the line of Abraham and therefore be cursed? Or are they going to bless the line of Abraham and therefore be blessed? Again, it all goes back to Abrahamic covenant. Those who curse you, I will curse. Those who bless you, I will bless. And Esau was wanting to curse Jacob, wanted to kill him whenever Isaac gave Jacob the blessing. Now, that doesn't end up happening. They end up reconciling, which I think is a beautiful picture of God's grace that we can talk about another day. But when you get to Obadiah, there has been from Esau forward a battle between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent.
So you're telling me that this little short book, that we don't get any of this introduction unless we are really dug into our biblical understandings, our biblical backgrounds, that this is really all about the battle between this promise or this curse actually that God places on the serpent?
I think so.
Wow.
Now, here's the beauty of it.
We need to have a disclaimer inserted here. I'm going to have a conversation with the Holy Spirit about the inspirational quality of this. I need a reference back to Genesis 3.
Here's the last thing I'll say, because I know I'm being long-winded.
No, this is good.
But here's the redemptive quality about it. So you think about the line of the seed of the serpent. Can the seed of the serpent be redeemed? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Wow.
Absolutely yes.
And boy, there's you another tie to Jonah.
Well, okay. What do you want to say? Oh, no, you're Nineveh.
I'm just saying that this points us that direction of a larger arc.
You move all the way back to Cain. There's most Bible scholars believe that the Kenites. Okay, when you come upon the Kenites, particularly in the book of Numbers and Joshua, Caleb himself was a Kenite.
He was,
and they believe that was from Cain.
Wow!
So you have Caleb and Joshua. Joshua being a direct line from Israel, from Jacob.
Had a line of promise.
But Caleb being from Cain. They're the only two who says, let's take the promised land. So God's people coming back together. And then you have, so here's what I want to say about Obadiah. When he's proclaiming judgment on Edom, Edom will be wiped out, yes. But what of its people, right? So in the Persian era, when everybody was taken off into exile, Edom was eventually taken off into exile. But then King Cyrus proclaimed an edict that all the people go back to their lands and resettle. Well, there was some renaming and drawing of lines, redistricting of the lines of the nations. And so Edom moved a little bit northwest, and instead of being called Edom, it's called Edomia. Okay, just like Judah was redistricted and called Judea. Same kingdom, but kind of a different name. And so that's why it changes from Judah in the Old Testament to Judea in the New Testament. Well, when you read in the New Testament of Edomia, that is Edom from the Old Testament. And we come across two instances of Edomia in the New Testament, and one of them is Herod.
Yep.
Herod is from Edomia, and he is still functioning as a seed of the serpent by trying to kill Jesus himself. He hears of the new king, and he says, I'm going to wipe out all the kids in Bethlehem. And he does so. Yeah. But Jesus flees to Egypt, so on and so forth. All right, so you have Herod, who's still functioning as a seed of the serpent. But then, I believe it's Mark 9. It says that people from all over were following Jesus. Then it lists all these different territories, and right there at the end it mentions even people from Edomia. And I believe that what Obadiah said at the very end, the kingdom shall be the Lord's.
Man.
Even people from Edom follows Jesus.
My mind is just pinging with all kinds of connections.
It's all over the place.
That is amazing kind of stuff, and what a tour de force of the biblical background for this really overlooked. And we, frankly, full confession, even now reading Obadiah, those connections are not there. But thank you for bringing that to light.
Well, I think even just when it says the word Esau and Edom, that means something totally different to us than it would an Israelite reading this for the first time. Right? And I think they may not have had those very specific categories teased out in their minds, but they would have had all those stories in their minds.
I mean, this would have been like the story of your great uncle who betrayed your father.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Your great
This is part
grandpa.
of their identity.
I mean,
Right. And so,
some bad blood.
Joe was talking about when Edom wouldn't let them pass through.
Yeah, they said, we won't even drink of your water without paying you.
Right.
Just let us pass by on foot.
And
then Edom says, no, if you come in, we'll come in with a sword. And then they chase them out.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's all this bad blood and all that. And if you read that just from a historical standpoint, you get some of the story. But for the Israelites, it was a theological issue. And you think about when you get to Paul writing in Galatians 4, where he says, now he doesn't bring up Jacob and Esau, he brings up them in Romans 9, but he brings up Isaac and Ishmael and Sarah and Hagar in Galatians 4, and he says, look, this is all about of the flesh or of the promise. They came from the same man, but Ishmael was not of promise. He was of the flesh, but Isaac was of promise. And we get to choose, right? That's his thing in Galatians 4. You can be of the flesh, or you can be of the promise. Are you going to be of yourself, or are you going to be of Jesus?
Yeah, amazing.
And that's a call out to anybody. And I believe that anybody who is in Edom at the time of Obadiah's declaration, even though their nation would be destroyed, they themselves could be a part of God's kingdom.
They could be redeemed.
They
Wow.
could be redeemed.
That's amazing. All right, build me a bridge to 2024 from this ancient little short book.
I think so. I mean, there's a ton, but I think the route that I'm planning to go is just that what I'm mentioning, right? So even though judgment may come, even though the Lord's wrath may fall upon us, and I think we're already starting to fall under God's judgment as a people and as the people of God, and even as a nation of America. Even though that may begin to come, we ourselves have the opportunity to be a part of God's kingdom.
Wow.
We may look around us and everything crumble around us, but we know, as Nahum will say, that the Lord is a refuge.
Yes.
And so that's I see that Obadiah is speaking to the nation, but he's also speaking to the individual. It is up to you.
And again, for me, one of the things that's happening with me as I'm going through this whole Minor Prophet series myself and with you guys in community here is seeing this arc, because Amos has gone to the people of God and said, judgment's coming to you because you've had opportunity to return, but you didn't.
Yeah.
Now Obadiah is going to some people who are enemies of God and saying, you are going to be destroyed, but there's hope for you too.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's going to send his prophet Jonah, who we'll talk about next episode here, and he doesn't want to go to the enemies of God because he knows how good God is.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, this is really a magnificent little view, a little lens to start seeing what's going on here. There's more than just this one little chapter of Obadiah. Obviously, we got to do a lot of digging, but
there's a lot
also
of digging
just in the context of the minor prophets themselves, how they fit together. That's a marvelous understanding.
Well, I'm going to save the rest for Sunday school and
show up,
sermons.
Be here. So, that's great. But man, our hope is that through this podcast, one, it's going to give you a little bit more meat to chew on, but also maybe whet your appetite to go and dig, because obviously there's plenty to dig into here.
There's plenty to dig.
Yeah.
All right. What else you got, Joe?
No, I think we're going over.
All right. Well, we're going to look at Jonah next time.
Looking forward to that.
And so hope to see you then.
Story.
Yeah.